What's up guys? In this video we're going to be installing some beautiful new skid plates onto our 5th gen 4Runner from RCI Off-Road. I will talk about all the neat features and benefits that these skid plates provide and why I chose them. We'll be installing an engine skid plate, some nice looking lower control arm skids, a fuel tank skid, and a trans and transfer case skid. So the OEM factory skid plates that come on our 5th generation 4Runners are made of very thin, light duty steel. Personally, I see them as being more of a shield that is designed to block stones and sticks, and I would never really trust them to support the weight of my vehicle over, rough terrain or rocks. If you do any sort of off-roading or overlanding, having a good set of skid plates on your vehicle can give you a sense of confidence and peace of mind when tackling, rough terrain and while traveling to remote destinations. I chose to go with RCI skid plates for my build as they have a great reputation, competitive pricing, and a lot of different options, including 3/16 steel, 1/4 inch aluminum, powder coating, and options for KDSS or non-KDSS. I went with aluminum for my build to save on weight, but if you do a lot of rock crawling, I'd honestly probably suggest steel for you. All right, let's talk about each of the skid plates we're going to be installing today. Let's start off with this front engine skid plate. I'm excited to get this one on as it has a lot of awesome features. This front skid plate is much more beefy than the OEM or replica TRD Pro skid plates. It will protect your diff, oil pan, and front cross member. It has openings for easy servicing and oil changes, unlike the factory skid, which has to be removed completely. It also has some very nice bolt protectors on the bottom, and it is designed to accommodate a vehicle with or without diff drops, and it does so without compromise. So it sits in the same position even with a diff drop. They have also put in a lot of extra work to design this diff cage, which is down here. This allows it to sit tighter to the vehicle while still protecting the diff. So this is a well thought out design or skid plate with a lot of great features for the 5th gen 4Runner. Next, we have the lower control arm skids. These will help protect the lower control arms and also allow us to slide over obstacles with ease, as they provide a nice flat surface on the bottom here, unlike the OEM ones. I'm not gonna lie, I just absolutely love the look of these, especially with the front skid plate. So there is also an aesthetic component to installing these. These also come in black powder coated steel if you're interested in that. All right, let's talk about the fuel tank skid. The 4Runner fuel tank sits really low to the ground and is quite exposed. I have already put some dents in mine, and if you poke a hole in your fuel tank on the trail, you'll be having a very bad day. This one is much thicker than the factory OEM skid, which is super thin, and it is nice and smooth, unlike the factory one, so you can slide right over obstacles no problem. It is also a direct bolt-on and requires no drilling. Okay, let's get the skids installed on the vehicle. Then at the end, I will show you how I installed my existing RCI trans and transfer case skid plate. Let's jump into it. All right, let's start off with the front engine skid plate. Let's just quickly talk about hardware here. So you'll have 3 bolts on each side. You'll have 2 30mm bolts and a 40mm hex bolt. So we're gonna start on the front. We're gonna install the 2 30mm hex bolts onto that radiator support. And then our next bolt will actually be the 40mm bolt. We're gonna install that temporarily in that middle section. And then we will install our 40mm on the back and our other 40mm on the back on the other side. And then we'll put this 30mm bolt in. For the back here, we do have this poly spacer, this 3/8 poly spacer. This is going to go between the skid plate and the actual frame of the vehicle. This will make more sense in the video. I'll show you guys the next steps and how we're going to put all these bolts in. But first, let's get the stock skid plate off. So to remove our front skid plate, we will have 4 bolts. They'll be 4 12mm bolts or 4 14mm bolts, depending on the model. You may also have a plastic splash guard between the front bumper and radiator support cross member. If you do, remove this now. You will not be reinstalling it. We're now moving back to the oil pan skid. There'll be 4 12mm bolts here, so we'll loosen these, get all those off, and this skid plate should drop down and move out of the way. We're now ready to put that brand new RCI skid plate on, so just get it in position. Here are the front mounting holes that we're going to start with. They're the smaller ones right here and right here. So we'll get that skid plate in place. I'm using a jack here to hold it up a bit and just getting those bolts started. We're not tightening them right up, we're just getting them kind of on there about halfway. And then we'll grab that longer 40mm bolt and we'll feed that up through the center just temporarily. Like I mentioned before, we're going to move this bolt in a moment. So we'll take our other 40mm bolt and that poly spacer. We're going to put that poly spacer on the frame, and then we're going to feed that bolt through and start tightening it up. Just loosely here again. Then we'll remove that other 40mm bolt and we'll move that to the back once we have that poly spacer in place between the skid plates and the frame. So get that bolt started. And we'll just put this one on about halfway. Now we're putting on the 2 30mm bolts in the center. Just get those on snug. Now we're going to tighten down and torque down the front, and then we're going to move to the back. And those are our 30mm bolts, and we're tightening these down to 30 foot-pounds of torque. That will be on all 6 bolts. So we'll do the front, then we'll do the back, and then we will do the center, all torqued down to 30 foot-pounds of torque. Once these are all torqued down, our new skid plate is installed. The fitment is great, and I think it looks fantastic. Let's move on to the lower control arm skids now. All right, so here are A-arm skids, or lower control arm skids. So this larger flange part is going to face the front of the vehicle, and this kind of narrow part is going to face out towards the tire. So this side will go on the driver's side in this orientation here. In the front, this is where we'll put the shorter carriage bolt. This one's 3.5, and the one out here is a 4-inch carriage bolt for the 5th generation 4Runner. And then this little one's gonna go on this part here, kind of close to the tire. So let's feed this one through, the shorter one, and then we're gonna put down our retainer clip. All right, and then we'll take our larger one, our larger carriage bolt, feed it through the back here. And we'll put another retainer on there. And I do not have a retainer for this one, so it's just going to be loose. All right, so installation is really easy. Just feed up those 2 larger carriage bolts, put your washer on, then you're going to put your nylon nut on the top of that, just hand tighten it down, do the opposite side. Then you'll feed in that smaller bolt with a washer on it. Then we'll put another washer on the top, and then we'll put that small nylon nut. Now we're ready to start tightening it down. So a 9/16 here for the larger ones. You'll need a long socket for the front. Then we'll do a 7/16 for the side closest to the tire, the smaller bolt and nut. Then a 9/16 just short socket for the back, and just tighten these down. All right, so I love those skid plates. That lower control arm skid looks great with that engine skid plate. Let's jump into the fuel tank skid plate now. It's a pretty easy install. There's about 6 bolts I think we need to undo and just a couple brackets. We're gonna get those undone, drop the factory one, then we're gonna put the aftermarket one in and some different brackets. So let's jump into it. All right, as you can see, my stock skid plate is pretty damaged here. It's already taken some abuse. So we'll kind of come to the front of this skid plate. Just above the drive line here, you'll have a 12mm bolt holding this bracket on. So just loosen that, use an extension to get it off. Once that is done, we'll be coming to the back of the vehicle now. Kind of just in front of the differential and above the muffler is another 12mm on a long bracket. We'll just remove that with an extension. And now we're going to come in front of the driver's side back tire. There'll be another bracket that comes up off the factory skid plate, and there'll be another 12mm bolt here we'll remove. Once we get that out, our skid plate will start to drop down a bit, but there's still 3 more bolts holding it on, which are located right here. These ones can be a little tricky as they can kind of rust on there a bit, so you might need to use a larger 1/2-inch drive with an extension, and they're 12mm as well. Once they're off, it should come right down easily. All right, so looking at our skid plate here, we have the longest one by the differential there. We have the shortest one in front of the back driver's side tire, and our medium-sized bracket kind of inside the vehicle towards the passenger side. We have 6 bolts here. They're going to put this skid plate on. We have 3 carriage bolts with lock washers, and nuts. All right, so here's our long bracket that we're going to install first. So this is going to go by the differential. Then we have the short one that'll go by the back driver's side tire. Then we have our medium bracket. So let's start off with the longest one here by our differential. So take that bolt. This is a 13mm, I believe, and just get that kind of loosely on there so it holds into position. Now here we are in front of the driver's side back tire. We're just putting that shortest bracket on. Another 13mm here. So here we are by the drive line. We're going to take that medium-sized kind of angled bracket, not the shortest one. The shortest one's just an extra in our kit that we're not going to use, and just tighten that on. And we're now ready to put the skid plate on the vehicle or start jacking it up. So get those brackets on the inside of the skid plate and feed that carriage bolt in. You can do it from either side. I decided to feed my carriage bolts in from the inside out. That way, if it gets pushed in by a rock or something, it's not pushing the actual bolt into the gas tank. So just get these on there loosely at this point. And then once they're all on, we can start tightening down all of our bolts. So I started with these 3 bolts on the outside, tighten them down. Then I did my bracket bolts, and then I did my 3 carriage bolts while pushing up on the skid plate, while also ensuring that they're spaced. We are now done the job, and our fuel tank skid plate is installed. I absolutely love the look of this from the side of the vehicle. All right, so to install our transmission skid plate, we'll have to locate these two supports under your 5th Gen 4Runner. There'll be one on each side. Each of them has 2 bolts on them. They're 12 millimeters. What we're going to want to do is completely remove those bolts. We're going to be replacing them with longer hardware. Now we're going to take our skid plate here. It has 2 slots for our bolts. We'll slide it into the bolts there, and we'll use a jack to support it. You may need to loosen this little cross member support in order to hit the right angle to put your bolts through. All right, so we'll put our 2 bolts through just loosely, and now we'll take this cross member support. This cross member support is going to bolt up here where these brake lines are. You'll have to loosen that bolt, and on the opposite side you'll have another bolt hole that may be a bit rusted, so you may need to use a tap to kind of tap it. It'll be an M8125 tap. So remove that brake line bolt and slide up the cross member using a jack, and then feed both those bolts back in on each side. All right, now slide your transfer case skid plate into position there onto those 2 bolts on each side. All right, now take the carriage bolts, and these are going to go where that support, that cross support goes. So we'll feed those up with the rounded part down, and we'll feed those locking nuts. Now we'll basically tighten up all of our hardware, and we're done. All right, guys, I love the way all those new RCI skid plates look on the 5th Gen 4Runner, and I'm happy to know that my vehicle is protected. I'll leave a link below to RCI's website if you guys are interested in picking up a similar setup to mine. I honestly think you can have the whole setup installed in a day. It really isn't that difficult to do, just removing bolts and putting new brackets and hardware in. If you guys found this video useful, please like and subscribe. I hope to come up with a lot more videos, and I always appreciate your guys' support. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye now.